As you can see here, S11, and for last 3 years, I've been involved in the project for Sustainable Development Goals. And as the project leader, I would like to express my sincere appreciation for so many people for participating in the symposium today. Now, in this project for 3 years, and we also did a feasibility study for 1 year prior to that. So we did a prior study research. So in total, we've done research for 4 years. So what did we do as part of this effort? And with that, the international process, the United Nations process, and also domestic discussion process, how we linked to that is also something that I'd like to describe today. Now, this project itself, so strategic study, and the Ministry of the Environment has this Environment Research for Technology Development Fund, and this is the 11th project as part of this fund, and this project began 3 years ago. And we had 4 major goals for this project. A proposal towards the establishment of the SDGs, and the sustainable development or international development will change towards the 21st century. So we felt that it was needed for us to rethink about the definition. And for us to do that, we need to have the linkages between people. So this effort for sustainable development has been done for quite a while, but those people involved in development or those people involved in the environment, development and environment weren't linked previously, so we needed to bring together the communities. And the fourth is to transmit internationally the research that we have been doing. So that's the basis of which we have been conducting research for 3 years. And as I said before, many people participated in this the research, and we have also collaborated with a broad range of people internationally as well. So we've been doing this type of research, and one milestone, if you like, was to create sustainable development goals, and we needed to link that to the future as well. So SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, what are they? Some of you may have this question, so let me start with that. So like was explained before, at the latter part of September, the General Assembly of the United Nations adopted these goals. There are 17 goals and 169 targets. And the targets more specific with regards to the type of activities that could be implemented to achieve these goals. And in March this year, how are we going to measure the progress? And the indicators for measuring the progress will also be proposed in March this year. And these 3 aspects put together, they form what we refer to as the Sustainable Development Goals. So what's the background to the SDGs being developed? So if we go back a few years ago, in fact 4 years ago, back in 2012, United Nations had a significant summit called the Rio Summit. Normally it's referred to as the Rio Plus 20 Summit. So the United Nations Summit on Sustainable Development. And it was agreed there that we need international goals. And if we look around, we had the Millennium Development Goals. And the final year for its achievement was 2015, and that 2015 was approaching at that point in time, and what to be done beyond was not decided. So it was that Millennium Development goals previously. So it was discussed that we need something that is more sustainable. So as a consequence, we came up with the Sustainable Development Goals. So Colombia, Guatemala, some of the key countries in the South America had proposed this type of thing, and it did not receive much attention back then, but it started to gradually improve to see more attention, and it became the biggest outcome of Rio Plus 20. And through 5 years of 4 years of negotiations, we saw the original form, and we had further input in the last year. And as a consequence, we came up with the Sustainable Development Goals. And the structure, we have the goals, targets, and indicators. In fact, it's a three-layered structure. And this type of international goals, when you hear international goals, you sometimes wonder whether they have legal obligations or legally binding or not. But with regards to SDGs, they are not legally binding, but implementation state will be monitored and the progress will be measured. So what has been achieved, what has not been achieved. So so it will be measured to what extent things have been achieved on a global basis, but also at the national level or the more regional level, like Asia, Africa, to what extent the goals have been achieved will also be measured going forward. And the fact that they will be measured means that they can be compared, and that's one incentive that is likely to accelerate activities towards implementation. And the target year, if we look at the goals in detail, we have some whether the target year is 2020 or 2025, but as a general rule, the final target year is 2030. And like Mr. Oike has explained before, it has a global nature, and it will be applied universally. So it will be applied to Japan, it will be applied to countries in Africa, it will be applied to countries in Asia. So it is something that will be applied to all countries. That's the objective. But when that is the case, then the goals may not be in line with the situation for various countries. So the goals should be the priorities with regards to goals should be considered based on the different situation, capabilities, and development level of the country. So that's the framework of SDGs. Now, at Rio Plus 20, there was discussions. But if we go back in history, we can actually go back about 40 years. And in the meantime, how should we address the environment and development? But despite discussions, not much led to implementation. That was the state in the past. But last year, we saw an agreement with regards to the SDGs. Ambassador Oike referred to last year as being a transformative year last year, which means that the agreement achieved had a significantly transformed our way of thinking last year. So what has changed significantly? In one word, development. The word development became a key theme for United Nations. So it transformed into sustainable development. When we talked about international development previously, people talked about economic development or social development mainly, but it's no longer that. It's sustainable development. Unless it is sustainable, one cannot think development as being development. That is now the core, the theme where the environment and development has been integrated. And I think that was a significant achievement from last year. Now, the process. So two things have integrated, and a key to that lied in the process, in our view. And we have been looking at the process from the very beginning. But initially, as you can see at the bottom of this slide, that we needed to think about beyond MDGs. In other words, things after MDGs. So there were discussions for post MDGs. That was the main type of discussions that were being held, and the group who were doing that. And as part of that, and in May of 2013, um, the proposal was made with regards to the goals after the MDGs. And most people thought that that had more or less decided the course of direction going forward. But what started to occur in United Nations at that point in time is the national discussions. So the MDGs was decided on a top-down basis, but with regards to the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, it was decided through international negotiation. And international negotiations began in 2013, and during the year of 2014, things were approaching the final form. And 2014, there was an international negotiations at the United Nations, but what to do after the development goals, and there wasn't significant movement in the development community at that point in time. So what to do about SDGs? As part of the discussions, various challenges were identified, and these became international key items. So in one sense, it was by chance we had come to this, but through these processes, we saw the birth of the SDGs that we have today. And having looked at this process so far, we felt that there were a number of very unique aspects. One was that in thinking about sustainability, we need scientific research and scientific consideration. And whether it be at United Nations, the negotiation, and those aspects should also be reflected into the outcome document. And a lot of those scientific aspects were reflected in the outcome documents. So what we refer to as OWG, Open Working Group, this was the forum at which discussions were held with regards to the the Sustainable Development Goals. And about 2/3 of that, the OWG, had invited the stakeholders and researchers to understand the status quo and had discussion with regards to what can be done to resolving these. And so felt that was quite a unique type of process. And here you can see the process up until the 8th project. There was 13 in total, but the 8 out of the 13 were a kind of meeting which is truly workshop in nature. And as a consequence of that, and it's been reflected into the contents of the 2030 agenda. And if we look at the details, it uses words that's often not used for diplomatic documents. So the scientific input or the outcome of the scientific consideration were reflected. Now, we engaged in various activities to try to have input towards this process. And as part of our research project, what we have been doing was that at the United Nations, what to do about target. And we felt that the target setting should not be done at the United Nations uniformly, but leave a room to enable target setting at national stakeholder level. Otherwise, it won't lead to success. Initially, there was a lot of discussion saying that it was at the indicator level that we should have a more national input, but the outcome of the research was adopted and was reflected into the final outcome document. Now, in order for us to consider this, we need to also think about scientific way of research. So we have also done a lot of new effort with regards to the research methods. And so that is a transdisciplinary challenges towards research. So people in the legal area, the politics, or whatever, the researchers from various fields, not just working together to resolve the issues, but the users who use the outcome. So even from the perspective, from the timing of setting the challenges, we encourage the participation of users and also use scientific aspect in that process. Now, at the target level, as I said before, we need to think about the goals somewhat differently at the national level. The government representatives, the researchers, and the joint chair of the working group. These people came together at New York, and together with the S11 members, we had a joint workshop to identify what are the important the challenges, what do we need to consider. So these were some of the things we discussed at that meeting, and the details of the discussions were brought back by the researchers, and how could that be fitted into the research that's being conducted? How can they be conceptualized? And these were considered. So we had the academic discussions and the proposal based on the academic grounds or the policies were to be publicized as a consequence, and the feedback from that were to be utilized in the next proposal. So these are the kind of things that we've done. So it was quite a tedious process. And we have asked the members of the project to go to New York many times, and we've addressed what can be done in order to leverage these. So it's somewhat different from the traditional type of the research that we've been conducting, but that's the kind of thing we've done. And we will be publicizing the outcome as an academic paper and so forth. But we also hold seminars and things like that at the United Nations. And some of these work were reflected in the United Nations outcomes document as well. So research project in terms of methodology, we've done a few things that was somewhat ingenious. And that's something that we saw being done in the 3 years. Now, the process for creating SDGs also had new the efforts that had not been made previously. Say, for example, the discussions at Open Working Group. The initial document said that it was to be discussed by 30 the government's experts, but 70 countries wanted to participate in the negotiation when it came to the negotiation stage. So what we've done was that we have divided out the 30 seats for the 70 countries. So 2 countries or 3 countries occupied 1 seat. So many countries participated in an open manner through these seats. That was the process that was adopted. Now, in hindsight, this process was extremely important. And I say this because and the negotiation for the climate change framework at the United Nations, the traditional developing nations, their position started to change because the level of their development has changed. And when the developing nations come together, they ask for priority on the economic development. So we end up with the kind of two-sided discussions. So what had enabled this type of approach was the fact that the 70 countries occupy the 30 seats. And the people who were responsible for negotiation, we held interviews with these people, and we've identified that we no longer had a kind of intergovernment coalition broken down, which enabled more the realistic discussions. So more frank and more practical, the theme-based discussions were enabled, and that was one of the reasons that has enabled SDGs that we have today to be formed in that way. Another key characteristics is that with the UN negotiation, first the document is presented. Various countries try to contribute to that. The document volume ends up being quite large, which is reduced in the end. And the document tends to reflect the position of various countries, saying this is not right, this is not right, and we have to go through the process of trying to converge those. But in the case of this negotiation, we have actually left it to the chairs for the various unresolved items. And those people who are studying negotiations are saying that this is a new way of negotiating. And this was enabled because the chairs were highly trusted people. But through these efforts, I think we have been able to come to the SDGs that we have. Now, SDGs, the characteristics of SDGs formed as a result of these processes. Many things have been said about them. The researchers tend to they criticize things. So what I've been criticized is that there are too many goals, 17 goals and 169 targets. That's too many. In the Millennium Development Goals, there was only 8 goals, so there are more than double the goals now. And because of this, it's difficult to understand. And when you look at the documents for the target, one can understand that there is a vision, but it is not something that is easily understood by lay people. So that's some of the criticism being made. And another criticism is that as a general view, the level of interest is somewhat lower in the advanced nations. Now, Millennium Development Goals, to start with, was to bring up the level of the developing nations, particularly the least developing nations. So that was the perspective of MDGs. So in that sense, since SDGs are extension of the MDGs, people tend to think that the advanced nations do not have a high interest. But that's not the case, because SDGs on this occasion is for universal applications. And that's one of the advantages of the SDGs, which is that there is an inclusiveness that we should leave out no one. And that is at the underlying the philosophy of the SDGs. So let's develop without leaving no one. Another the strength is that the SDGs should be applied universally. But the world we live in today, there is diversity. So when we try to reach an international agreement, we have NGOs, the businesses, various stakeholders now participate in forming these agreements. Normally, international politics were politics between country to country, but these days, international the organizations have a much stronger say. So one of the challenges for SDGs was how to deal with the diversity. So we decided to have an aspect of diversity in SDGs in the sense that the goals can be set on a per country basis. And the indicators can also be set at the regional or national levels. That's one of the key characteristics of the SDGs. Another important characteristics is that the 3 dimensions, the economy, society, and environment, will be integrated and will be handled at the same level. And this is quite a significant point. And I said the 3 dimensions. From the MDGs, one challenge that remained outstanding, and the majority of that linked to the economic development. But as the presumption there is poverty or starvation, that leads to worsening of the environmental degradation. So the Earth system needs to be considered as the underlying aspect, otherwise cannot resolve the issues that we face. So if we look at the climate change context, it links with security as well as terrorism. The media report also reported the fact that there is a close linkages between the two. Say, for example, around Syria, several years ago, there was drought. So the people were unable to get access to water and food. And as a consequence of the climate change, these people ended up going to the large cities. But there is a problem of poverty and diversity, disparity issue. And the IS people approach these people that do terrorism. So disparity or equity or fairness. We also need to think about these issues. So all these issues are interlinked and needed to look at them from comprehensive perspective. So these were considered to be important for implementation. And also from the perspective of our research, we needed to address these front on. Otherwise, we felt that we will not be able to achieve some of the goals. Sustainable development, sustainable progress. And it's been considered that it is built upon three aspects, which are environment, society, and economy. And it's based on these three pillars that the sustainable development stood on. But as a result of Rio Plus 20 and as part of the SDGs, what became quite apparent was that these three aspects needs to be considered in an integrated fashion. In other words, the interlinkages between the three pillars need to be considered. And Mr. David Briggs, he is here today. He also participated, and I participated, but we tried to see how can this be conceptualized. The economy, society, and the environment, these are kind of contained in each other. And in implementing SDGs, this aspect is likely to become quite important. Now, say for example, if we look at the issues associated with food, if we look at the targets of SDGs, various challenges are related. The goal number 2 is related to starvation or food, but it's not only that. Sustainable consumption and production. The food issue is associated with production and how they're to be consumed. How are we going to address the wastage? These are also linked. So by bringing together these goals to reach a goal, and that's the global goal, and that's the kind of concept that needs to be adopted when we address this. If we take a different example. Education. We also researching the issue of environment. We talk about education for all, but not only that. The ESD, Education for Sustainable Development, should also be linked to education for all, and we need to think about indicators to measure that. That's also that we have been doing as part of our research project, and these efforts are the concept that lie at the fundamental area of sustainable development goals.
And another important thing is that the Earth system is reaching its limitations. When we started the research project, it was a very starting point for us. The environment of the Earth, we are to. But currently we have 7 billion people. By year 2050, the population of the world is going to be 9 billion. So therefore, if we continue to use the resources as we do today, we will not run out of resources. That is only natural. But But it's not that we are going to reach the limitations, but in some of the areas, some of the fields, as a result of research, we found out that some of the things are already reaching the limitations. There is the concept of planetary boundaries. The planet or the Earth system, for us to operate it in a healthy manner, in some of the fields, there are some boundaries for the Earth to operate in a healthy manner, out of which problems like climate change, there is the decline of biodiversity, and also biochemical phenomena. We are already seeing the limitations or the boundaries of the planet. Data is also showing that it is reaching the limitations. As you can see here in the diagram, from 1950s, we have been watching the data from 1950s. The consumption has been increasing constantly from the 1950s. So if we continue with the development as we do today, we'll not be able to live on the Earth any longer, which is quite evident. So while we solve these issues, we also need to develop, and how we can do that is something that we looked at in our research. For example, the Earth system, planetary boundaries, the boundaries of the planet. There is a boundaries with, if there was a line that you cannot surpass, how can we develop within the boundaries, and where is the boundary is something that we focused on in our research. For example, if we are to continue to consume resources, what kind of impact is it having on the Earth, and what would happen in a long-term basis is also something that we looked at in our research. Or energy system. If you are to change the energy system, the kind of resources that we have not been using so far may be used. That new resource, is it, if we were to grow, avoiding the planetary boundaries, will we be able to have enough resources to survive? And where are the boundaries is something that we also looked at. So we put together all the knowledge to come up with various proposals that we have made so far. The details will be covered in the discussions with the panel later on today. And we looked at, there's a need to look at sustainability from different aspects. And also there's a need to link various problems and issues, which we believe is an important message that we would like to convey. Furthermore, this kind of knowledge or information is something very difficult for people in the public to understand. Scientists, when we try to, scientists find it difficult to communicate in an easy to understand manner as well. So how can we make it easy for the public to understand is also something that we looked at in our research group. So what I would like to do is to show you a short movie that explains about the limitation of the planet, of the Earth. Very easy to understand. So this movie was created as with a cooperation of many overseas researchers. It was not translated into Japanese, but we decided to do the translation into Japanese within a research group so that people can watch the movie. So let me show you the movie. This is a story of a living creature called humanity reproducing the Earth. The story started in UK 250 years ago. Here in UK, several epoch-making inventions were born. Soon came the Industrial Revolution, and the impact spread to Europe, North America, and to Japan. The world was connected with railways and cars. With the advancement in medicine, more lives are saved. With agrochemicals, more lives are ahead. The population surged. But this was only an introduction. The real leap started in 1950s. With the globalization and with the expansion in investment, the world achieved a remarkable growth. People flooded into cities and pushed further the growth. In a few decades, our lives improved dramatically. Health, wealth, safety, longevity, and other benefits are now being enjoyed by more than ever before. We now have the power to reproduce the earth. The amount of soil we transport is more than that transported by nature. 3/4 of the land, excluding the ice, are controlled by humanity. We increased the concentration of greenhouse gas in the air to the record high level. We raised the temperature, made holes in the ozone layer, causing damages to biodiversity. World's data are sinking because of dams. Sea level is rising, and the ocean is acidifying. We're about to reproduce the Earth. Today, we are living in a geological age of Anthropocene in which human is in the ruling position. The Earth is exposed to constant load and is becoming unstable. However, we also have a hope, so-called creativity. As we have shaped the past, we should be able to shape the future. You and I, we all have a role to play and burdened with the responsibility to protect the Earth. For the future generations, let us explore the limitation of the system of the Earth, which is the safe operating space for humanity. Welcome to Anthropocene. So I think it is very important that we create videos like this so that Japanese people can easily understand the concept. The terminology used, some of them are sensitive, so we were very careful in choosing the Japanese terms and to make sure that we communicate properly the message to the Japanese people. In the video, it said that we have the wisdom. One of the wisdom, was to create the SDGs themselves. The SDGs, with these goals, we push things. So we talk about governance originating in target setting. So that is, from the international politics point of view, it's a new concept. There was an example of Millennium Development Goals, but I think it is very first time that SDGs, the goals, are used in a universal manner. So there are some things that are impossible to understand, but it's going to be a good opportunity to push forward the change. That itself is the process. The Framework Convention on Climate Change is a good example. The multilateral environment-related conventions, they are multilateral conventions in place. That includes various negotiations and also making adjustments of domestic policies. The international regime approach was taken in creating multilateral conventions. But if we do that, as shown in the video, and as we have seen the previous slides, we are about to reach the limitation of the planet. So we have to make sure that we do not go beyond the boundaries. We need to reduce the CO2 emission, and we also need to consider increasing the recycling as well. It is impossible to reach to that point. measures that need to be implemented to protect the earth and the things that we can do. If we compare the two, there was a huge gap. That is something that we have identified. What are we going to do with the gap is a major challenge that we need to overcome. One of the things that we can use to fill the gap, I believe, is the SDGs. It's a completely different from the conventional approach. It is not a bottom-up process, but rather we come up with the target, we come up with a goal and come up with the specific actions. People have been saying that implementation is going to be important. Implementation is about to start in this year. So what we do is we start with a target and come up with the implementation progress. So that we need to come up with a theory on this. And we have been studying on the new mechanism. So when we are to implement multi-level governance, as we call it, global, region, nation, local, there are many stakeholders involved. So many stakeholders can be engaged to do, so each stakeholder can do what he or she can do. So that kind of governance mechanism could be a possibility. And another more important thing is the money. Of course, public funding is very important, but in addition to public funding, funding from the private sector should be utilized. And to make sure that private sector investments or the funding could be used in the sustainable areas. To do that, what kind of mechanism is required is something that we also looked into. The outcome of the researches that we have conducted will be compiled into a document or into a book to be presented. And another important thing is that we need to think about inequality or the disparity. We talked about food earlier as an example. The minimum level of calorie intake can be achieved today. Why is it that we cannot distribute the food? A recycling system, waste disposal system, or the distribution issue between developing countries and developed countries. And on the one hand, there are people who are starving, and on the other hand, there is people who are struggling with obesity. So how are we going to take a balance? To solve these issues, we have to think about distribution and to take the ownership in these problems. So the clues to solving these issues, we believe we can find in the SDGs. So going forward, what are the future challenges? So we need a system in place to implement the SDGs on national level. There are many challenges which are related. If we try to solve the issues in a vertical manner, it will be impossible to solve these issues comprehensively. We may solve one issue, but we may not be able to solve the other. So therefore, there is a need for establishing a kind of control tower. And if there are good things, we need to expand. We have people are putting a nice or like button for Facebook. So best practices should be shared and expanded internationally. Is going to be something that should be done going forward. And lastly, in the package that we have distributed to you, there is a booklet. The title is the Prescription for Japan to Achieve SDGs. For our discussions today, we decided to release this document to start the discussions. There are the global SDGs, but on the other hand, there are priorities in Japan. So in line with the priority of Japan, we set up the SDGs. Or from the SDGs point of view, how do we see the issues that we face in Japan? What need to be done to translate the Japanese challenges to SDGs? So that is the prescription for Japan is included in the booklet. So there are 17 goals for SDG, but we have 9 fields that we have identified. So if we come up with prescriptions to be implemented for the 9 fields, we know that we'll be able to achieve the SDGs of the United Nations to a certain level. But to achieve that, we need the consensus of the public. In Japan, we may have the target towards 2020, but we do not have target for 2030, or towards 2020, we may have a target that is close to SDG, but the target towards 2030 may be a little different for SDG. But those are shown in X's. By implementing or by fulfilling these prescriptions, what goals or what problems can be solved is shown here in this booklet. Does not cover everything, but we did get inputs from the experts. We also got input from the researchers of the research projects. We achieved comments from the public using the internet. So we compiled all these inputs to be presented to you using this booklet. So I'm looking forward to having panel discussions based on this. The final outcome will be published as a paper on a journal. We are also going to publish a book. And in terms of international collaborations, you will find the information on the website. And we would like to continue to making contributions to the policy. There is a report to be issued by the United Nations called Global Sustainable Development Report. We would like to strengthen the link with them. The project is going to be finished this year, but we would like to come up with a separate project to continue with our research activities. The details you will find on our website. Thank you very much for your kind attention.